Hello guys, I hope and pray that you're fine wherever you are. Welcome again to this platform. Now, in the world today, there is no shortage of wars. Men are fighting men, women are fighting women, men are fighting women, and vice versa. Individual countries are fighting individual countries. Regional blocs are fighting regional blocs, and continents are fighting continents. If I ask the question about the causes of these wars, I know many will identify or state regional differences, ideological differences, economic issues, boundaries, and many more. But in my view, there is a constant that is resulting in all these wars. There is a constant that is fueling the conflicts between individuals, conflicts between countries, conflicts between regions, and conflicts between continents. This constant, in my view, is the lack of respect. Why do I say that the lack of respect is the cause of all wars in the world today? In the modern world, that is, in the present world that we live in today, there is an entity that has positioned itself as the policing unit in the world. This entity purports to establish the rules for economic engagement, the rules for political engagement, and the rules for social engagement. This same entity purports to define for sovereign nations, individual countries, what they should include in their administrative structures, what they should include in their social issues, and what they should include in their economic policies. The entity that I am talking about is the United States. The United States has always positioned itself as a global policing unit. It has positioned itself as an entity that constructs and implements world order. This establishment of the United States is deemed or is communicated as a lack of respect for the sovereignty of nations. The United States dictates or wants to dictate to African countries what they should include in their political policies, what they should include in their social policies, and what they should include in their economic policies. You all remember that just recently the United States issued travel bans to Ugandan officials for their, let me say, their sovereign duty to pass laws. You remember the Ugandan parliament passed the homosexuality law that illegalized homosexuality in the country. The United States, in a reaction to this establishment or this move, the United States issued travel bans to Ugandan officials. The United States was simply saying that Uganda, as a sovereign country, Uganda, as an independent nation, cannot pass laws that is against our social rules. The same United States is dictating to China how to engage with countries in Asia. The United States is dictating to China how to engage with Taiwan. The same United States is rallying other NATO members to dictate to Ukraine and Russia who to engage with, who to do business with, and who to help politically. The same United States is dictating to North Korea who to engage in diplomatic relations with and who to help economically and socially. I think all these engagements and all these moves by the United States is communicating a lack of respect for the sovereignty of these nations. United States has positioned itself as a world policing unit that dictates to other sovereign nations. And mark my words, sovereign nations. When we talk about sovereignty, this means that these countries are independent. They are capable of making their own decisions. They are capable of making their own economic, social, and political policies without consulting anyone. What we see today is a global policing unit that lacks respect to the sovereignty of other nations. The United States lacks respect to the sovereignty of African nations. The United States lacks respect to the sovereignty of Asian nations. And the United States lacks respect to the sovereignty of Russia and other countries in the global space. I want the United States to understand that the time for colonization is over. Even the United States was once colonized. Today, it makes its own political, economic, and social decisions away from the dictates of the British. The British cannot control the United States today, and the British cannot say that the United States must follow its economic, political, and social policies. The same should apply. If the British respect they respect the sovereignty of the United States, then the United States also should respect the sovereignty of other countries. The United States should respect the sovereignty of African nations. The United States should respect the sovereignty of Asian countries. The United States should respect the sovereignty of European countries and any other country in the world. Why am I saying this? It is lack of respect that caused the Russia-Ukraine war. You remember the United States, as the purported global policing unit, pushed Ukraine to join NATO. And this move communicated a lack of respect for the sovereignty of Russia and the Russian Federation. It communicated a lack of respect for the sovereignty of Asian nations. The same thing is happening between China and Taiwan. The United States is pushing Taiwan to be independent. The United States is pushing Taiwan to maintain sovereignty away from the connections with China. This move displays a lack of respect for the sovereignty of Asia. It displays a lack of respect for the sovereignty of China and Taiwan. The United States must not communicate, must not dictate to Taiwan on what to do politically, on what to do economically, and what to do socially. If the United States respected the sovereignty of Russia if the United States respected the sovereignty of Ukraine, then as we speak today, there will be peace in Ukraine, and there will be peace between Ukraine and Russia. This same lack of respect led the United States to invade Iraq. This same lack of respect led the United States and other NATO members to invade Libya. We will all agree, and all of you will admit, that Libya is still in war to date. Iraq is still in war to date because of the blunders of the United States, because of the lack of respect of United States to the sovereignty of these nations. The United States, in its purported objective to save Iraq from the grip of Saddam Hussein, convinced other NATO members, convinced the United Nations Security Council to launch the Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. To me, and in my school of thought, this invasion was pure lack of respect for the sovereignty of Iraq. Iraq is still a sovereign nation. Iraq is an independent nation, and it needs to make its own political, social, and economic decisions. The United States bypassed this sovereignty, bypassed this independence dictate, and invaded Iraq. Outside the outlined conditions, it invaded Iraq, killed Saddam Hussein, and plunged the whole country into chaos. The same United States, in its purported objective of saving Libyans and depriving Muammar Gaddafi of weapons of mass destruction, launched an operation in Libya, killed Muammar Gaddafi, and plunged Libya into chaos to date. The same United States is pushing Ukraine into an endless war. The same United States is pushing other NATO members to supply weapons to Ukraine to ensure that the war between Russia and Ukraine never ends. Many Ukrainians have died. Many global citizens have died in Ukraine, and many Russians have died in this war because of the simple blunders of the United States. The same United States is purporting to call the shots in DR Congo, but the calling of the shots equals to extracting minerals from this country. You remember, DR Congo is still in war to date. You remember, the Central African Republic is still in war to date. You remember, the Central African Republic still in war to date. You remember, Ethiopia still in chaos. Somalia still in chaos. Burkina Faso, Mali, and many other African countries are still in war to date because of the simple blunders of these foreign countries led by the United States. The United States is leading delegations, leading efforts in criticizing the liberation struggles ongoing in West and Central Africa, which to them they call coup d'etats, overthrowing of legally elected governments. But to me, I see them as liberation struggles. If the world is to be at peace, if the endless wars are to be eliminated, if countries are to maintain their diplomatic relations, then respect should be a constant. If the United States wants to establish strong ties with Africa, If the United States wants to establish strong economic, political, and social ties with Europe, if the US wants to establish strong ties with Asia and any other part of the world, then respect should be the constant. Respect operates as a two-way traffic. Respect me and I respect you. Disrespect me and I disrespect you. This same ideology, this same framework applies to the engagement between the United States and other global partners. If the United States disrespects Africa, then Africa will automatically disrespect the United States. If the United States disrespects Europe, then Europe will automatically disrespect the United States. If the United States disrespects Asia, then automatically Asia will disrespect the United States. The United States, as the purported global policing unit, must understand that countries are sovereign. It must understand that countries are independent. And the meaning of independence, the meaning of sovereignty, is that these countries are capable of making their own political, social, and economic decisions. They are capable of making their own policies. They are capable of making rules that govern their people without necessarily consulting global powers like the United States. The United States must understand that African countries have the capability, have the authority to make their own rules, their own constitutions that govern their people. Until this is done, until the United States displays the respect that is required in maintaining world order, then I believe people will still fight. If the United States does not display the respect that the world requires, if the United States does not display the respect that protects the sovereignty, the independence of nations, then war will reign. The only way to end the endless wars, the only way to end the conflicts between countries, continents, individuals, is by maintaining a high value of respect. The United States must respect other countries. The United States must respect the sovereignty of African nations. The United States must respect the sovereignty of Russia. The United States must respect the sovereignty of North Korea. The United States must respect the sovereignty of Asian countries, including China. If this is done, if this is achieved, then I see the world being at peace again.